All right, welcome. You are joining us for the DPI and Google for Education Learning Series. This is volume 4. Can't believe that it's been 4 months already since this has started. We've had some really great presentations, and really it's been myself and Mike sharing some great tools and resources from not only the Department of Public Instruction, but also from Google for Education. And how they're working together to really move education forward in the state of Wisconsin. The facilitators for today, I'm flying solo. Mike is caught in traffic, so he sends his apologies, but I know that he will tune in and give us some great feedback. We're excited as we are on to number 4, and we are actually getting an opportunity to really focus on what this learning series is about, and that's highlighting the amazing things happening across the state. Today, we are joined by Jen Wathke from West De Pere and Jamie Averbach from Ashwaubenon, and they're going to share with us today all the work that they're doing with AR and VR in school districts. So I welcome the two of you and turn the screen sharing to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm Jamie Averbach. And but before we get into our introductions, I did want to share our screen here. So you have our slide deck. And on the bottom of that page, you'll see our gg.gg/wisco-VR link. That'll take you to this slide deck. So if you are watching this later, you can access our slides and follow along with us. So with that, I'm Jamie Averbach. I'm the Instructional Technology Coordinator at the Ashwaubenon School District. Feel free to give me a follow on Twitter at Averbach Tech, and I'll turn it over to my partner in crime.
I am Jen Wathke. I am a Library Media Instructional Technology Specialist at Westwood Elementary in the West De Pere School District. Also, feel free to give me a follow on Twitter or shoot me an email later on if you have questions. Also wanted to say we have not been able to do much of what we're about to present to you without our awesome teams. We both have teams of technology coaches and media specialists within our district that have helped with much of what we're going to share today as well. So I'll kick off by saying one of the things that Jamie and I have heard a lot as we've kind of ventured into learning more about virtual reality. We both had a passion about integrating virtual reality within the classroom and the curriculum. And one thing we've heard a lot of is it's too expensive, or we don't understand why, or people are trying to convince their administrators why they need some of the equipment to be able to do some of these things within the classroom. And I think both of us would say that we default to this visual a lot about why you should be using virtual reality in the classroom. And I think both Jamie and I would agree that many of these points that are made in Sylvia Duckworth's illustration here are great reasons to try to incorporate that more authentic experience for our students that also usually end up developing a lot more empathy because they can experience those things virtually as well. So share this with your people, that your decision makers in your district, if you're looking to start to integrate VR into your classrooms. So kind of going back to our story, again, Jamie and I are both were united because we really love to incorporate virtual reality within the curriculum. And we came up with a crazy idea. He was doing some things with 4th graders with Wisconsin history. I was doing some things with our kindergarten teams with community helpers. And we got our teams together with Ashwaubenon and West De Pere and decided to create something called a Wisco VR. So I'll have him kind of click on that for you and navigate around a little bit. This is something that is free and open and available to anybody that would want to use it. By going to wiscovr.org. You can head to our website, and really while he's getting that pulled up, we've kind of separated that into Wisconsin history and the pieces of Wisconsin specifically that 4th grade is going through, but we've also realized many of our other grades are using that content as well. And then the other thing we've been using it a lot is the community helpers and community service piece. we were finding that as we were going into Google Expeditions specifically, that for instance, our 5th graders were researching a recycling center. We could find the New York Recycling Center, but we couldn't necessarily find anything local when we tried to encourage our own students to recycle and things like that. We wanted them to see where their trash was actually going. Or with our kindergartners for October Fire Safety Month, we wanted them to be able to go to our actual fire station in De Pere or our local area instead of going to these fire stations that really were not applicable to their lives. So you can see once you get in, they're separated in 2 spots. So we'll just go into the fire department. We've contacted a lot of different local businesses with community helpers, and we've gone in and we've used our equipment to do some pretty basic virtual tours of these spaces. So for instance, this was a De Pere fire station visit. We collaborated with the firemen or a couple of the firefighters there and did some different virtual tours of their areas. So even as the librarian in my school, I had this mental image of a 2-story firehouse and all the firefighters kind of sleeping upstairs in this co-sleeping area and waiting for a fire call and sliding down a pole, because that's what many of our books are illustrating to our kids. When realistically, now I can pull this up and show them, like, our firefighters have a really nice private space that they actually get to sleep in while they wait for those fire calls when they're working those long hours. So we use this one, for instance, for teachers to use before they go on their trips, or if they can't get to a field trip to the fire station, they can pull this up and show the kids before the firefighters might come to school and talk to them in person as well. So I think Jamie would agree. We've used these trips a lot. They're great for some of our autistic or special needs kids that don't know what to expect, or students with anxiety don't know what to expect when they're going on a field trip. We can pull this up. We can show them what to expect. And I would say on the flip side of that, we're using it a lot after field trips. Especially sometimes your field trips don't align perfectly with when your curriculum starts. So if they're going on a field trip a month beforehand, teachers are pulling this up within their classrooms to kind of go back and remind their students what they may have seen while they're on their trip. So that's kind of where we started. And that was really because in the past with Google Expeditions, we were not able to create our own content. And then along came, I'll have Jamie go back to our presentation, along came Google Expeditions Beta. As a Google Education trainer, I received an email that asked if I wanted to be a part of the beta experience to start creating our own content. So again, this was not just an effort on my part. I contacted our team with Ashwaubenon and West De Pere and said, hey, we have this opportunity. We've already created some content. Why don't we try to put this into Google Expeditions? And as you can see, that expedition was approved and is listed under Google Expeditions now in Google Poly. So that was kind of our first official tour. We went out to our environmental center called Fallen Timbers and worked collaboratively with Matt out there. And asked if we could do a virtual tour of the maple syruping process. If you're familiar with maple syrup, you know that the syrup only flows, the sap only flows with certain temperatures. So we had some students that were going out for a visit, and unfortunately the weather was not cooperating and they weren't able to go through this process. So this was something that the teachers could show the students regardless of the time of year, so that they could go through and see the actual maple syrup process to go along with some of the curriculum that they're learning here at school. So that's kind of how we got started. And then we had Tour Creator came out, which allowed us the flexibility to make these tours more easily and share them a little bit easier as well. So I'll let Jamie kind of talk to you about the different content options from here.
Awesome. So Jen just did a really good job of telling kind of our old way of how we use 360 cameras and a Google site to host, and Wisco VR is a sample of that. And the other piece that I just wanted to piggyback on is, I think the greatest part of this Wisco VR project was how our two school districts really engaged our community in helping our kids create those learning experiences. We've had a lot of untapped Wisconsin businesses, museums, locations that we asked, it was a quick yes. And then we went through the process, and it was awesome to engage them in the learning and bringing the community into our schools, which is always a great thing to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly overview the rest of our presentation. So Jen just kind of shared with you what Wisco VR looked like, how we did that. I'm going to talk to you about how we can access, or how we can do this in the new way, which you also can use 360 cameras, guided searching and using Google Tour Creator. And then finally, we're going to touch on Google Poly for searching already created content that's out there. So with that, the first thing I want to talk about, a lot of times people ask us, what do we use? And, we use a variety of cameras, and obviously our goal is to do this fairly inexpensive. And we found a lot of success with the Ricoh Theta series cameras. Ricoh has numerous cameras now. Jen and I both have the Ricoh Theta S, which is being discontinued, unfortunately, but they have the Ricoh Theta SE, which is about, the SE is $199. The SC2, the new one, is about $299. I also have the Ricoh Theta V, which does video, which we're not going to touch on today, and 360 video, we're still trying to figure out where that fits, because it's you have to deal with motion, and I don't know if we want to deal with goggles and motion all the time, depending on your comfort level with sickness in your classroom. So the Ricoh Theta V is an option too, and they actually have a new one, the Ricoh Theta Z, which is their 8K, 4K image, and that one goes up to about $1,000. But I would say this: the $199 entry level Ricoh Theta would do pretty much everything you would need to do that we're going to show you today. The other camera that we do have is the Lenovo Mirage, which is a VR, it's a 180 camera. So instead of getting the full immersion 360, you just get the 180 degrees, which is a good one to have, especially when you're thinking of like a museum where you only want the person with the goggles or on the screen accessing content that's in front of them, and that really what's behind isn't important. And then lastly, if you don't have a camera, that's okay. There are some apps that allow you to do it. The Cardboard Camera and the Android app, and on the iOS version, it's the Street View app, allow you now to take basically multiple panoramic pictures, and it stitches together for you. But as I'm going to show you here in a little bit, you can also just use Tour Creator's Street View app within Tour Creator to just grab 360 images that are already out there. So it's up to you really what way you want to go. But if you really want to create that authentic 360 experience like Jen and I did with Wisco VR, when we enabled our community to kind of help us, having a camera is nice. So that way you can take pictures of locations that kids are really going to identify with and see. Because as Jen said, when you're talking about recycling and it's the Brown County Recycling Center versus a recycling center in New York, kids recognize that and they drive by that facility, and then they make that connection easier. So with that, we're gonna talk about Tour Creator, and I'm gonna switch back over to Jen.
All right, so Tour Creator came out, and it was a fantastic transition, because what happened is it allowed us to finally create content more easily, and we both feel that it's much easier for students to start to become content creators as well. The process is streamlined a bit. So what is it? It's an online tool where you can create immersive 360 tours that can be shared and viewed by others. So you still have the option to keep those private if you'd like. It's much like YouTube. They can be private or they can be public to be shared with the world. And then multiple scenes, just like the maple syrup one that you saw before, and maybe we'll have you click on that again. There are 360-degree images that you can also add some narration onto, voice narration, text descriptions, points of interest, and then those image overlays. So as you can see with the maple syrup, you can see at the bottom it's scene 1 of 6. So we chose to add 6 different scenes. And then once you see those little eyes pop up, you can click on that eye, and that shows you that there is more additional information. And from there on the left, it gives you a description, so that if you're leading this with a group of students, you can click on the different eyes and describe to the students or the adults what they're seeing and go through that entire process with them. So you can see at the bottom there is a like option. There's also an option to share that out. But it kind of puts everything in one spot for everybody that needs to use that virtual tour.
All right. So let's get started and give it a try. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to go ahead and launch Tour Creator. And the URL to that is arvr.google.com/Tour Creator. And you simply go ahead and press Get Started. And I'm already logged in with Google. If you're not, it'll ask you to authenticate with Google. And we'll just go ahead and hit New Tour. So a few things here. This is where you're going to give your tour a title. And I'm going to call this our DPI Google test. You have to give it a description. So we're going to do a 360 tour of Ashwaubenon High School. And you have to pick a category. So this is going to be, let's say, for travel and leisure. And you have to pick a cover photo. So have something ready. So what we would suggest is when we would go to a location, sure, we took 360 photos, but we also took a lot of still imagery. And you saw how we actually did video as well that we embedded on the Google site with YouTube. But the best thing we did was we would always kind of storyboard our tour prior to, like, what is it that you're hoping, what story are you hoping to tell, right? What is the intended learning you're hoping to get out of this tour? And then kind of map that story and then start tying images, 360 photos, videos, or not videos, sorry, still images, 360 photos, as well as tech support and audio support, which we'll share in a minute. So we're gonna go ahead and select an image. And I created a little folder here. We're gonna start this off with a paw print. My West Up Here person's gonna get mad at me here pretty soon.
It's okay, I forgive you.
All right, so I now have my Google test, my title, my description, my category, and my cover image. I'm gonna hit create. So we now have two options. If I brought a 360 camera and had the images already, and something I didn't explain actually with the cameras is all of the cameras have the ability to connect with your phone. And the easiest way, what we did is we would take the picture on the camera, we'd upload it into our camera feed, and then we would geotag that camera or that photo in Google Maps. So it was searchable, it was uploadable and embeddable. So so that's kind of neat because then it's all tied to the actual location where it's at. So if we had that 360 image uploaded, we could search it by hitting the upload button and just finding that specific 360 or 180 image. But like I said before, if you don't have a camera, you don't need one anymore. You can simply do Street View. So I'm going to type in 2391 South Ridge Road. And you're going to see Google is going to pull up the map. I'm just going to grab the Street View guy. Jen, I forgot his name. What is it?
Pegman.
Oh, thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
Pegman.
Pegman. And I'm going to drop him in. And now you can see there's that Ashwaubenon's football field. Maybe I'll go down one more. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit Add Scene. So now what I have is I have a 360 image from Street View. And you can see, I want to make sure my starting view is right here because I want it to be on the football field. So I'm going to hit down here in the left-hand corner, the Set Starting View. And I'm going to drag, sorry, a little over-aggressive with my mouse here, drag where I want it and hit Save. So now I have my untitled scene. I'm going to change the name of this to AHS Football Field. Oh, my computer's got to catch up here. All right. Sorry, I'm not typing well today. And my computer's a little laggy. All right. So now what I've done is I've added my my scene and I've titled it and I give them the description. And Jen's going to talk about no, actually not yet. Yeah, actually Jen's going to talk about some ways that we could add some features to this scene.
Right. So from here, I want you to notice before we start adding points of interest, there's a little narration button underneath what he had just typed underneath credits. We would strongly discourage you from adding scene narration. And the reason we're saying that is because what happens is once the person opens the scene, that narration continues to loop. So when we tried this, we just heard our voices on repeat narrating over and over and over, and it was rather annoying. So instead of adding that narration here, what you might want to do instead is add it underneath your point of interest. So from here, if Jamie were to click on add a point of interest, what he could do is start adding a spot. Maybe he wants a spot right on the football field. You can drag that eye wherever you'd like it to go. And then you're going to want to title it, describe it, so that if somebody is doing your tour and is unfamiliar with the space, they can read that out loud to a classroom of children, or they can read it to themselves to learn more about it. And then the two buttons underneath, I know Jamie's working to catch up with me here, try not to go too quickly, is you can add a picture, and that would be like an overlay. So if somebody hovers over it and you want to see something more closely, you can select an image. So for an example, what we did is during our maple syrup tour, the tapping of the trees, we wanted the kids to be able to see that, that spigot that was coming out of the tree. So we added an image overlay so that they could see that more closely when they hovered over it. This is where you could also add scene narration. Just keep in mind again that it will loop as long as that person is on that eye. So from here, you can add as many points of interest as you want. You can kind of continue adding those in. And then once you're finished with that scene, see he's popping a football in there, awesome. Once he's finished with that scene, at the very bottom, you can continue to add additional scenes. So we have not found a limit for scenes, but obviously once you have this storyboarded out, that's something just like if you're writing a paper or you're doing a Google slideshow, you're going to want to have this all planned out with students. So our workflow is definitely, to echo what Jamie said, is before you even let them head into Tour Creator, all of those 360 or 180 photos have been taken. They're all uploaded into a Google Drive folder if you're going to be using external photos. And everything is set to go, because unfortunately, Tour Creator is not collaborative. So Jamie and I cannot work on this, this presentation or this tour together. We have to work with one person's computer. So you're going to want to make sure that everything is on that person's Google Drive and it's all ready to go, so that once they pop into Tour Creator, they can just get everything uploaded. So if Jamie wants to add more, he can click on Add Scene again. You can click and drag those scenes around. So if you want to reorder them, that's another option for you. So he could drop Pegman somewhere else. This is great for tours that might not be local tours. So maybe the kids are learning about the Grand Canyon and they want to talk about different parts of the Grand Canyon and the canyons. They could find a picture of the Grand Canyon in Street View and pop that in there. They're obviously probably not going to be able to take a field trip to the Grand Canyon. So it's great in that it allows students to go to places that they cannot otherwise travel to, but still pull those in to create a tour. And I'm gonna, are we all set with those? And then we can talk about publishing, James?
Yep.
Okay. So once you're finished, I'm just gonna hop to publishing. You click that publish button and then you get to choose your visibility. So the two drop-down options are really private or unlisted, which means that the person has to have the link to be able to view the tour, or public, which means that it will be available for anyone to view in Google Poly. So choose that very closely depending when you're taking your 360 photos, although it's difficult at times. Try to choose times where there are not any students or humans that will be in your photo. Our workflow is we just set that Theta S on top of a tripod, put it in the middle of the room, and then on our phones, we stepped out, clicked that picture button, it would take the picture, we would go in and grab it. So it's a pretty quick, seamless process, but we definitely tried to make sure that we did not have any pictures of people inside our 360 photos as well. So if you do publish it, the one other thing I wanted to add in is you can go back in and edit. So if you decide that you want to add more, you can go back in, edit your tour. You just have to make sure you republish once you've edited so that everything gets updated. So we're going to have Jamie take us into Google Poly so he can kind of explain what that is. And then I'll talk a little bit about where this can be viewed.
All right, I'm gonna close a couple of these tabs because my
Yeah,
computer's
that's
got
a
a little
great idea.
bogged
Maybe
down.
that'll help things.
And I'm thinking that it might have to do with the fact that I'm sharing a whole bunch of 360 imagery at once.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if this is better. I'm going to bounce ahead. So as I'm showing you this, we went through and we actually made help slides for everything we just discussed. So if you go to our slide deck later on, or if you're watching this video, you have the ability to do that as well. So as Jen said, once you hit that publish button, Google Poly is where your 360 imagery is going to live. And what Google Poly is, it's a lot of things, but it basically houses most of Google's 3D content. So I'm just going to switch out and go to Google Poly. Actually, it's poly.google.com. And once you're in Poly, there's lots of different things in Poly, from AR to VR imagery to all sorts of art, Google, the arts and museum content that they have. But what you can do in the search bar here is you can search, just as Jen said, you can search for content. If I search 360, I'm going to get a whole bunch of 360 tours. And if I really wanted to find some of that previously created Google content, I can add Expedition. And what you're going to see is, actually, I'm just going to search Expedition. What you're going to see is this. You're going to find one of these tours, and underneath the title and the description, it says Google Expeditions. And if I simply click Google Expeditions, it's going to show me all of these tours that either Google created or as part of their Expeditions beta program, where people created them and they were approved by Google to be here. And all of these are, for the most part, professionally done 360 tours, expedition tours. So if I wanted to know about the Great Bear Rainforest, I get this to load here. Ooh, that's a pretty cool picture. You can see that there's 6 scenes. It's already done. So the neat thing about Poly is that if you know you have content coming up, whether it's doing some research around people or places in ELA or science or social studies or any of our cross-curricular activities, Expeditions has a whole bunch of content that you can search and find and build some of that background image about places and really immersing yourself into that location as a student, whether, as we will talk later about whether they're wearing goggles or doing it via their Chromebook or an iPad, but it really kind of places that student into that content. And there's a lot of content available there for you. The other thing that you can do is once you're in one of these, you have the ability to like, so it kind of allows you to curate the expeditions or the tours that you choose, and you can like your own as well as other previously created. Before I move on to the next slide, Jen, do you have anything to add for Poly?
Yeah, I would just also add anything that you like is going to be saved to your account, but that share button as well, it's an easy way to, you can actually embed this right into a Google site or share that out through Expeditions as well. So, or just share the link, which is really simple. So you can take that, you can pop it into a teacher web page if you have one already. You can share it out through the Expeditions app if the kids are using that, or just simply give them a link and allow them to explore. And that's one thing that I was going to touch on next, is kind of where this can be viewed. VR, unfortunately, virtual reality is kind of gotten a bad rap as far as how expensive it is. And we're trying to dispel that myth. Many of our students are just using virtual tours on their Chromebooks or on their iPads, tools that they already have within their classrooms. If you're one-to-one or you're checking those out from a library, you can simply pull up those virtual tours and click on them on a normal screen and take those tours right where you are, right where you're sitting. Teachers can also pull those up if you have smart boards or interactive boards within your classroom and want to do this whole group. You can take a tour together as a classroom. So this certainly isn't something where you need to go out and purchase really expensive VR goggles and cell phones or iPod touches and get all this gear set up. That's a really labor intensive way to do it. Don't get me wrong. It's more authentic that way. But you don't always need to use the goggles and the expensive equipment to have your students experience VR and take those tours. For a more immersive experience, think about some of the things and the challenges you have at different grade levels. For me, speaking at the elementary level, I really like the Viewmaster goggles. They're plastic, so I don't need to worry about lice because they don't have a head strap. They have a hand strap on it so the kids can put those on so that they don't drop the equipment that we're using. So we do use those from time to time, but something as silly as little kids with virtual reality, for many of those students, it's their very first time doing VR. And for some students, it can be a little disorienting and sometimes cause some motion sickness. And if you know any 5-year-olds, a lot of times they don't know they're getting sick until they've already gotten sick on a rug. So just be careful with some of those VR experiences with the smaller students. It is very different from what they're used to, giving them breaks, making sure they're safely sitting either on a chair that spins or on the ground, because they get very excited when they're doing these kinds of things. So as you're looking at purchasing equipment for your district or for your school, keep in mind that you don't need to spend a whole lot of money anymore.
Sure.
Download that Expeditions app and do this for free.
Absolutely. And I would say the way that we probably prepare this content the most is that embedded on a website piece. I mean, I would say very rarely are we sending students or to Poly. We're for the most part are linking it within. As we embed it onto a Google site, probably just an insider trader rule would be don't embed. I would try to embed one tour per page, because as you saw when we were streaming multiple tours, it kind of bogs down a little bit, especially on Chromebooks. That way your device only has to catch up on that one page. But then also think about, though, how students can access websites. The number one way our kids probably access VR is through either pushed out web addresses on their iPads, like an app, or QR codes. We have a lot of kids that will, whether on their Chromebook or on their iPad, they'll scan that QR code and the 360 tour just pops right up. And that really, when you talk about just-in-time integration into your curriculum, you talk about, like, if you're talking about a specific setting in a book, just slap the QR code right in that book, right on that page. That then the student knows when they get to that page, they can scan that code and they're in that setting, which is a really, really cool way to talk about people and places, is when you can, as Jen said, you can really step in and be fully immersed into that. So
I would piggyback on that too and say Google Poly, although we're sharing it, I would say it's mostly for the adults. So go in there, try to harvest some awesome tours that people have already done that you can use with your students. But for the students, like Jamie said, you're going to want to send out, either embed those into a website or send out a link to those tours so that students aren't spending a ton of time on there as well.
And those links work great, whether you're delivering it through Seesaw or Google Classroom. There's lots of ways to deliver those links to your students.
All right, on our last slide, you can see that we have a ton of additional information for you from people all over the place. Some of our friends in Iowa, some of our friends right here in Wisconsin. Kathy Schrock's got some great stuff. So if you're looking to expand your knowledge with virtual reality, feel free to visit some of those. And on our very last slide, we just have a reminder that if you have questions for Jamie or for myself, please feel free to reach out anytime. We really enjoy talking to people about this. If you're creating content, especially if you're here in Wisconsin, we would love to add your content onto our Wisco VR site as well.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off that, please reach out if you have any questions. I laugh because Jen and I have done this presentation numerous times, and we normally struggle to keep it under an hour. But I think for those of you who know us, we are kind of the king and queen of sidebar conversations. So not having anyone to ask us questions in the physical it's made us actually get through this in 37 minutes, which is pretty interesting.
Miracle, Jamie.
Guys, this is fantastic stuff. I think, the whole purpose of this learning series is really to highlight a perfect example, the things that you guys are doing, the examples that you gave in a lot of different, and really the fantastic thing about this, the AR and VR, is it can go and be embedded in any content area. It's not specific to any one. And so, you know, all of these ideas are incredible, and you're doing exactly what we were hoping, and highlighting some of these Google tools, but really, as I'm going through and I'm thinking, man, you're really empowering kids, right? The empowered learner from the ITL standards, you're turning it over to them to not only to investigate, but really take ownership. Once they get good at this, they're creating these tours. You've got global collaborators, right? You create these, you upload them, you could share with other classrooms within your school, but you know, maybe across town, another town, or really across the world. The options are endless, and the things that you guys are doing are fantastic and amazing. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to share the work that you're doing, and you know, this is perfect stuff. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
Again, definitely want to thank you guys for taking the time to join us today. As with any of the learning series, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Mike Patterson, your Wisconsin Google for Ed rep, myself, Chad Kleefoth, and especially for this particular learning series, reaching out to Jen or Jamie. They're really good at getting back and answering questions and sharing their knowledge and experience. So appreciate your time once again, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you.
Thank you.